What if I told you that Chanel isn't automatically the best-smelling perfume in the room? Now, before the Chanel fans come for me, let me be clear. Chanel has earned its legendary reputation. Fragrances like Coco Mademoiselle and Chanel No. 5 have shaped modern perfumery and remain extremely influential. But perfume isn't mathematics. There is no bottle that objectively smells better on every person. So today we're doing something more interesting. I'm giving you 5 luxury fragrances that, depending on your taste, may smell even more impressive, more distinctive, or more luxurious than a classic Chanel. And these aren't random perfumes. Each one has a story, a recognizable identity, and a price that tells you exactly where it sits in the luxury fragrance market. Stay until number 1 because it isn't necessarily the most expensive, but it might be the one that makes Chanel lovers stop and ask, "What are you wearing?" Number 5. Byredo Bal d'Afrique. Let's start with something completely different. Bal d'Afrique by Byredo. If Chanel represents polished Parisian elegance, Bal d'Afrique feels more like elegance with movement, sunlight, music, and personality. The fragrance was introduced in 2009 and was inspired by Byredo's interpretation of Paris in the late 1920s and its fascination with African culture, art, music, and dance. And that inspiration matters because Bal d'Afrique doesn't smell like a traditional French perfume. It feels brighter, more relaxed, more modern. The opening brings in bergamot and African marigold, creating a bright, almost sparkling introduction. Then violet and other floral facets soften the composition. And underneath everything, you get vetiver and cedarwood, giving the fragrance its elegant woody foundation. Byredo itself describes the fragrance today as a celebration of African creativity and its influence on dance, music, and art. And this is exactly why someone might prefer it to Chanel. Chanel often gives you that unmistakable, polished, sophisticated French character. Bal d'Afrique gives you sophistication without feeling overly formal. It's the kind of perfume I would recommend to someone who says, "I want luxury, but I don't want to smell like everyone else." And here's the important point. Don't buy Bal d'Afrique because someone says it's better than Chanel. Buy it if you personally prefer a brighter, cleaner, more contemporary style, because that's what makes a fragrance worth owning. Price. The exact price depends on the market and bottle size, so always check the current Byredo price before purchasing. Luxury fragrance prices can change over time, but compared with Chanel, you're clearly shopping in the premium niche luxury category. And that brings us to number 4. Number 4, Creed Aventus For Her. If Bal d'Afrique is artistic and effortless, Aventus For Her by Creed is confident, very confident. This fragrance has a fascinating connection to one of the most famous names in modern luxury perfumery, Aventus. Creed introduced Aventus For Her in 2016, creating a feminine counterpart to the famous Aventus identity. Creed describes it as a fragrance inspired by pioneering, bold, and confident women, with the house's history and equestrian heritage influencing the concept. And the smell? This is where things get interesting. Aventus For Her opens with a bright combination of bergamot, lemon, green apple, pink pepper, and violet. Then the fragrance develops into a more elegant heart involving rose, sandalwood, musk, and styrax. And the base introduces fruity, floral, and amber facets, including blackcurrant peach, lilac, ylang ylang, and amber. What makes it different from a classic Chanel profile is its personality. Chanel can feel perfectly polished. Aventus For Her feels polished and assertive. It has that I know exactly who I am energy. Imagine walking into a room wearing a perfectly tailored suit or an immaculate evening outfit, and nobody needs to explain that you're confident. That's the personality of Aventus For Her. And there's another reason fragrance collectors pay attention to it. Creed positions the Aventus collection around craftsmanship, heritage, and distinctive ingredients, and Aventus For Her remains one of the house's signature feminine offerings. Price. Creed's current collection lists Aventus For Her from €165 on its European site, with pricing varying according to size and market. So, yes, this is not a cheap alternative. This video isn't about finding something cheaper than Chanel. It's about finding something that may feel more exciting to your nose. And now we're getting into serious rose territory. Number 3. Parfums de Marly Delina. If you love feminine perfumes, there's a good chance you've already heard the name Delina. This pink bottle has become one of the most recognizable fragrances in modern niche perfumery, and the story behind it is just as important as the bottle. Parfums de Marly says Delina was inspired by the refinement and elegance associated with the women of the court of Louis XV, figures of elegance, influence, and sophistication. But don't expect an old-fashioned historical perfume. Delina takes that idea and makes it modern. The opening is juicy and vibrant, built around lychee, bergamot, and rhubarb. Then comes the star, Damascena rose. Not a dark, heavy rose, a luminous, feminine rose surrounded by nutmeg. And finally, the fragrance settles into cashmeran, musk, and vetiver, giving the perfume warmth and structure. This is where Delina can beat Chanel for the right person. If your idea of luxury is a classic powdery Chanel style, you may prefer Chanel. But if luxury to you means romantic, feminine, modern, noticeable, and unmistakably expensive smelling, Delina becomes very difficult to ignore. There's also something interesting about the rose used by Parfums de Marly. The house says its Damascena rose is sourced from Isparta, Turkey, and that approximately 1 million flowers are needed to produce 1 kilogram of essence. That doesn't mean every molecule in Delina is natural. Modern perfumery uses both natural materials and aroma molecules, but it shows why rose is treated as such a precious material in fine fragrance. Price. And here's where Delina becomes seriously luxurious. The current Parfums de Marly US website lists Delina 30 milliliters at $250, while the 75 milliliter bottle is currently listed at $410. That's expensive. But Delina isn't trying to compete with Chanel on affordability. It's competing on identity. And number 2 takes that idea to another level. Number 2, Maison Francis, Kurkdjian, Baccarat, Rouge, 540. Now we're talking about one of the most recognizable luxury fragrances of the modern era, Baccarat Rouge, 540. Even if you've never owned it, you've probably smelled it. And its story is fascinating. The fragrance was created by perfumer Francis Kurkdjian in connection with Baccarat during the Crystal House's 250th anniversary. The concept was to capture the transparency and density of crystal through fragrance. And the result? Something incredibly distinctive. The fragrance combines a luminous floral character with woody and ambery warmth. The official composition highlights jasmine and saffron, followed by an accord evoking ambergris and dry woods. Then comes a gourmand facet associated with ethyl maltol. The result is simultaneously airy, warm, sweet, woody, and almost mineral. That combination is why Baccarat Rouge 540 became so recognizable. It doesn't smell like a traditional rose perfume. It doesn't smell like a traditional vanilla perfume. It doesn't smell like a classic citrus perfume. It creates its own atmosphere. And that's one of the strongest arguments for choosing it over a classic Chanel. Chanel gives you heritage. Baccarat Rouge 540 gives you a modern signature. But there is one major warning. Because this fragrance became extremely popular, you've probably smelled many fragrances inspired by it. That can make the original seem less unique than it actually is.